Okay, I think there's still some people to join, but I'm going to kick off right now. So at the end of last class, we were talking about sample exam and whatnot. So I actually was working on that. It's actually not sample exam, but more like sample question and kind of some idea about the exam. So one thing I do need to make a correction on, which I haven't posted yet. Right now, it's saying the hourly exam is like from 7 to 8. Actually, that's incorrect. The exam is actually 90 minutes long. So it's actually from 6:30 to 8. So I'm going to fix that shortly. But this is the sample here. We talk about, for exam 1, and we're talking about the 23rd of June. It's going to be 6:30 to 8. You're going to have to put your submission in through Canvas by 8 o'clock. And if there's any issues, concerns, whatever about the time or whatnot, I guess there shouldn't be because that's part of our normal class time. You have to let me know as soon as possible. And then we'll deal with that on a case-by-case basis. So do let me know if there's any issue with the first exam, okay? So, basically you probably have already seen this on the student schedule, but basically it goes through all the different chapters it covers. We have the learning objectives, which is over here on the home page. You can see the course objectives, part 1 right here. So that's what's going to be covered. This kind of goes into the formats a little bit. And, basically you're going to have like some true false questions, multiple choice, some short answers and whatnot. That's considered part 1 of the exam, right? So you see this here, part 1. And then you have longer questions, which is basically going to be your number conversions and doing some HTML, writing some HTML for this exam 1. In case you haven't done this online exams before, you basically go through each question. You have the one shot. You can't like go backwards on this. So you basically have to keep on moving forward. So do be careful, double check your answers. Once you answer it, you can't go back. It's done. And so, yes, what it's saying here is saying it will be locked after you submit your answer. You can't go back to answer the questions. Okay. So then there's some other stuff to kind of, talk about basically don't cheat. It's open notes, which is fine, but you can't be talking to other people. The one thing I will also note is you can see right here, calculators and online calculation conversion tools are not to be utilized during the exam. So I believe someone during the first lecture asked me about Excel spreadsheet to basically do what I was doing for the conversion with the formulas. So based on that, actually, you are not going to be allowed to use the Excel sheet because that's going to be treated the same thing as a calculator or online calculation conversion tools. Okay, so yeah, just show your work, right? Hopefully you've had a chance to kind of understand the conversions for binary, decimal, and hex, and be able to show that. So some people have asked me about like the hex conversion. So I think what is acceptable to me is, and I've also told this to the TAs also, who are actually going to be grading your exams, is that there's 16 characters in hex, right? So if you show the 16 characters and you show like the four-digit binaries for each of them, and then you kind of say, well, I wanted you to convert this hex to this binary, and you kind of like circle that and say that's the mapping that I'm using. To me, that's fine, right? You could do the binary and hex conversions kind of in a similar manner, but you can also use the binary and hex mapping that I just mentioned, okay? And then, like I said, we kind of have those couple of gains between binary and decimal conversions going both ways. So make sure you understand that concept and be able to explain that, right? So, you can be able to show all the powers of 2 and then put all of your numbers like the 1s and 0s next to it and say, okay, then all the ones that have a 1 next to it, you add all of those together, let's say, right? That's a good explanation of how you did the conversion, okay? But yeah, I did want to emphasize this because I know someone asked a question about this in my first class. So I want to clarify on that point. And like I said, I want to clarify that although it says here it's an hour, it's actually an hour and a half. It's a 90-minute exam starting at 6:30. Okay. Special accommodations, again, you need to let me know sooner rather than later, right? Because I need to put something into the system to handle special accommodation situations. Okay. And then you kind of go through here. Yeah, so the first exam here is on June 23rd. Okay. So here's like some sample questions you'll see here. I mean, we've been covering the numeric conversions. You got this, which is I'm going to cover today. These are like these Venn diagrams. Of course, HTML, which I'm also going to start to cover, right? This is HTML again. Then you have things like what we covered last lecture, lossy and lossless compression. Again, you have the hexadecimal information, Google PageRank, which I'll talk about today as part of today's lecture. How do we make a picture brighter? How do we increase or decrease the contrast of a photo? How do we increase the intensity on colors, right? Those are kind of stuff that we covered in the last lecture. And then you have the RGB values, red, green, blue, and you talk about what that might be, right? So let me see here. Explain how analog sound is digitized. So you talked about like the analog digital converter. You talked about like Nyquist. Talk about like how many times you have to sample the sound wave, right? And talk about the bit depth so we can get somewhat of an accurate reproduction of the sound from a human ear perspective. You have the HTML again here. So that's pretty much it. So as you can imagine, we've already covered a lot of this content already. And as I alluded to in the first class, the class is going pretty fast paced. So if you see something on here after we go through these lectures that you're not clear on, the book doesn't explain it, or the lecture hasn't explained it, or the recitation hasn't explained it, you need to reach out, send me an email, send the TAs an email, or drop into our office hours. My office hours are on Fridays. If you want to drop in on that, just send me an email so I can schedule a slot for you on Friday and you're good to go. Okay. So anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on this sample exam, but I will post this up shortly. Again, I keep on saying sample exam. It's actually sample questions, right? So you should be able to go through this. Again, some of the material I haven't taught yet or you haven't covered in your recitation. But I'll post this up shortly and I will fix this to say 6:30 instead of 7. Okay. In case you can't see here. So this is where it's saying where the exam is, right? So, and do let me know if I intended this calendar to be pretty accurate and comprehensive to give you a good view of exactly what you need to do each week, right? So each week, we talk about the different topics we're going to cover. We talk about the readings. Here's what's going to be covered in recitation, the assignments that are going to get posted, right? The post date here, the initial due date for the assignment. If you're going to turn it in late, then you have an accept until date here. And here's the exam information. Here's the point assignments. So hopefully it's pretty comprehensive. If there's anything missing from here, make sure you let me know. Okay. All right, so let's get going here. Drop this off. And so we're going to start off with chapter 5 here, and then we're going to go into chapter 4. So this is basically kind of laying the groundwork in terms of looking at different things on the web. And then chapter 4 will actually step into your HTML, right? And it'll be the basic HTML stuff. So let's get started here. All right, so there'll be this idea of like, what are crawlers, more sophisticated searches, right? I mean, I'm sure everyone has kind of done like a search on whatever, Google, let's say. And then, different things that go into like why certain pages will appear at the top of your search, right? Like ranking, I'm going to kind of show you like certain things with advanced searches, but I'm not going to really cover that too much on the exam. It's just more for your own information. I'm going to try to keep it more on the basic searches, which is probably what most people will be doing, right? Most people are really kind of going to be using and on your searches, but it could be or it could be not, and I'll cover that in a second too. Okay. I'm not going to try to go too crazy with combining logical operators. I'll probably just use the Google Advanced Search. And yeah, we'll leave it at that. I don't want to get too crazy with this. That's part of the material that I'm trimming for the summer session. Okay. All right. So how, a search engine, right? Like I said, probably almost everyone knows using Google, right? So that's a typical thing. And so, what is it? How does it work, right? It's not like you type something in and then right there and then someone says, okay, let me go and search the internet for all these things that you're looking for, and then order them and give it to you, right? That would take way too long, right? So you probably know most searches that you do on Google, it's like extremely fast, right? And you can make some fairly complex queries and Google will come back very quickly, usually. So that doesn't just happen by magic. They don't really kind of just go out and search, figure out what you're trying to search for and then search right there and then, right? There's a lot of like preparation, right? They basically prepare a lot of things to make things easily searchable, right? So you could imagine if I'm looking at a book without like a table of contents, without a glossary or whatnot, you just kind of open the book. You have no idea like what chapter you're looking at or whatever, right? And if it's like a big book, like you're going to spend a lot of time to search for something, okay? But what Google does, and if I draw the analogy to a book, what people do is to try to organize the data a bit so you can easily jump to what you're looking for, okay? So it kind of works in a similar general level idea. How they get there is obviously very different, okay? So when you talk about like a crawler, right, they kind of represent it with this like a little bug or spider thing, right? You basically have these, for lack of a better word, crawlers that are going through all of these publicly visible pages that are out there, right? And really just looking through the pages and trying to like organize it, like they're looking for keywords, they're looking for maybe images and whatnot. So you're kind of trying to look at the page to kind of say, what is this page about? What are the things that this page is talking about that people might be searching for? Okay, so there's like these automated crawlers that will go through pages on a regular basis to do that, right? And then they'll analyze the page content, right? And then, what I was saying in terms of like a book, right? When you have like a table of contents and index and whatnot, it will create these pages that will be make it easier for me to go and search. So I don't actually have to go and look through all the pages myself. I go to the table of contents, or I go to the index in this case, right? And so there's different ways, and different search engines have had different like algorithms or ways to say which pages are good pages, like authoritative pages, right? You can have like a whole bunch of pages talking about a particular topic, but maybe you might consider, for lack of a better place, like Wikipedia as like an authoritative source on something. So it might be ranked higher than some other pages that, some random person just wrote, okay? So that's a little bit simplistic, and we'll go into like some other different ways that, ranking algorithms help to organize all this data, because there's tons of data. There's tons of web pages out there. So how do you know which page is a good page? Okay, quote unquote, good page. And then all of this is organized. So what I'm saying is all this is happening on a regular basis all the time, right? And it's getting organized so that when I'm here, this is a user here, when I go fire a request, I'll basically get a response back very quickly, right? So that's the whole idea, is for me to, not only get a response quickly, but get a response that returns good data back to me, right? So high quality information coming back to me. These are good ranked pages or whatever, authoritative pages, okay? All right, so you have this here. There's like a YouTube that kind of basically talks about the same things that I just talked about. So you can kind of take a look at that. I believe I left a link to this on my resources. I'm going to double check that after this class. If I didn't do that, I will put that up there. So you'll be able to just click on the link from my page. And then, let's just kind of step through some of the key things that help us with organizing this information. So here's like descriptive text, right? So we're going to get a little bit of this when we go into HTML, right? So in HTML, these are tags. And so let's say I have a title here, right? Well, part of what does the title do? Part of it kind of says, well, this is what this page is about. And it also kind of puts it up like at the tab on top. Let me open this up here. So something like this, right? Like HTML, like that. That's kind of what goes up there when you do the title, okay? And you have anchor text, you have meta, you have alt attributes, right? And so all of these different types of things, not only is it talking about, what, let's say in this case, you're talking about an image, right? So I'm going to try to get this image, but it's also trying to give you some tags to kind of say, what is this image all about? Maybe it's a picture of an apple or something like that. So you want that type of information to be picked up by the crawlers and by the ranking, not the ranking algorithms, the crawlers, to be able to say what this page is about. So in this page, I have a picture. The picture has apple on it or something like that, right? There's other different metadata talking about like, okay, what type of encoding I have on the page. Maybe there's other attributes I want to have on the page that other people, I want the people looking for certain types of pages to be able to see that. So that's what all these different things are here, right? And so just like what we're talking about with the index here, so here's like a topic, right? So let's say this Henry Lamory, and then this is 19, right? Or actually you're saying this, right? Index Lorinda Lamory, right? And then here's all the different pages that has this, right? That's pretty much what you're looking at when you're doing like a web search. It's going to be searching all of this data and saying, I'm looking for something. And then it says, oh yeah, here's all the different pages that has that in there, okay? And so what happens when you're searching for multiple things, right? So in this case, I typed in human powered flight, okay? But actually what Google will look at is it'll say human and then powered and flight, okay? It looks at it as kind of like three separate things, right? If I had typed human, it would look, let's say here, right? If I had typed in powered, it would be looking at something like over here, and then flight, it would be like over here, right? And then when you say and, right, this is like saying that it must have a human and a powered and a flight all together. And so how it does that is it looks, well, I found this website here, rs.org. I found rs.org over here, and I found rs.org here, right? And you remember this was like finding a human, this was finding the powered, and then this is the flight. And then it just says, okay, these three things intersect or come together. And you might see that more easily when we do the Venn diagrams later, okay? But that's how it takes these queries and does an and or join of all of these to get a common document or common set of pages that include human, powered, and flight, okay? And so this Venn diagram kind of illustrates like that intersection I was just talking about, right? So you can see here, boom, boom, boom. These three are in common across all of these, right? So if I look at this Venn diagram, you see human, you see powered, and you see flight. So in a Venn diagram, it's kind of showing like, it's almost like defining the universe of pages that have human in it, right? This circle, right? And then same thing with this power, it's the universe of pages that have powered. And then on the flight, the universe of pages that have flight. And then the intersection where all three of them are on the same page is this shaded area down here, okay? So without typing in and, like when you just type in human power flight, Google automatically just assumes that this is what you mean, and, right? I keep on referring to Google, but it's really just, any kind of generic search engine is going to behave this way, unless otherwise stated. So this is what they call a logical operator of and, right? So any type of basic queries, you're going to assume that there's an and in there unless I put something else in there. Okay, and this is the most basic one. This is the most common one that most of you, when you're typing, that's probably what you're essentially asking for. Okay, so human powered flight, this is what you get. Okay, and behind the scenes, this is what's happening. Now, the next one is a or, right? And you see what happens here. It could be a human, or it could be a powered, or it could be flight. So what does that mean, right? So that means when I come back to here, instead of taking like these three things that intersect like this, it will just give me everything. It will be like all of this, or all of this, or all of this, right? And that's why your Venn diagram shows your universe of pages to be all shaded, right? Human, powered, and flight, all three circles are all shaded in. That means when you look at the web page results, it's going to show everything, right? Maybe you get a page that only has human in it. Maybe you have a page that has human and flight together, right? Maybe you just have a page that has a flight. It has everything all together. Okay, so that's what an or means. And then you have human and powered, and then or flight. Then it kind of gets into like more complicated stuff. I generally don't like to kind of mix these type of things. If you kind of get into these type of things, I'd rather just use the advanced Google search, and I'm going to go to that in a second. So you have the logical operators, you kind of combine it. These parentheses, even though if I left it like this, it would just kind of go from left to right. But these parentheses kind of just emphasize that you want to action this type of join first, and then you're going to process this next. Okay. So in this case, you're saying human and powered, right? So forget about this part, right? Because you're processing this part first, right? So human and powered, right? So if you didn't have this flight part, you would say human and powered, it would be like this shaded here area here at the intersection here, right? Now, once you include that, then you put in this part, which is or flight. So that means it's the whole universe. Anything that has flight in it, you would pick that up. So that's how you ended up with this type of picture, where you have the human empowered intersection here, and then you have the flight like that. Okay, so that's how these Venn diagrams work, right? Trying to put together like these queries with the ands and ors. You try to represent it in these Venn diagrams to say this is the universe of things that make up that query. Okay, so this is the intersection and, or is this, and this is and or. Okay, this one is just using quotes, right? So you kind of just say we want this set of people, a set of characters, right? So we the people, right? So you put that within quotes, and then you have the or and the Constitution. Okay, and then this is the not. The thing you should make sure you be careful with is you have to put the not with no space with the word. I'm going to demonstrate in a second. So let me go back to here. So I like to do this with images. So let me do a search here. Apples and oranges. Okay. So if I go here, I like to do searches with images because it's pretty easy to see. So in this case, I'm saying apples and oranges, right? And generally that's what you're gonna see here, right? So some sort of reference within the picture has an apple and orange, okay? It's not 100% like correct all the time, but most of the time it's pretty accurate, right? Especially on a simple thing like this, right? Notice on this one, it's not exclusive saying only apples and oranges because you see a banana here, right? Now, if I change this and I can say or oranges, okay? So you kind of see a similar type of thing, which you would expect that's included in the set here. But you can see down here, look, this one only has apples, although it has apples or oranges down here, right? You know, when I do the or statement, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have both apples and oranges. Okay, so that's what the idea with the or is, right? It just happens a lot of times we do have apples and oranges here. This might be better if I can say apple. Okay. So you can see this, we have a couple boats here like that. We have apple here. There's an apple on the side of this, whatever you call this gravy ladle thing, I guess it is. So that's what you mean when you have an or, right? Let me do a tiger. Right, so naturally that comes up like this, right? And then I can say baseball. And so generally, if you do that, it's, remember I said that's treated as an and. So it's the same thing as if I put an and here. Okay. And so generally it kind of knows you're talking about the baseball team, Tigers, right? But if I want to do a not, remember I was saying you have to put a minus sign here. So I'll put a minus sign here and no more baseball team. Like that. Okay, so it's all just the animal tiger, okay? Like so, okay? So this just basically how you kind of put different things together. So now if I go to here, there's a couple other different things you can do to kind of increase your the refinement of your sort of your search. I don't know. So let's do large. I don't know. Maybe I'll do a different color. Let's do green. Let's see what happens when I do green. Okay. Maybe I'll do GIFs. Creative Commons and licenses we'll go over actually towards the end of our semester. Okay, so so the reason why I don't really go into like more of like the command line and try to type everything in the search bar is like if you really want to do some more complicated searches, you can use this advanced search, right? So you can put in like more of these words, you can put in like exact phrases, you can say, or any of these words, right? So that's the difference between and or, right? So and would say with all of these words, with any of these words, it's essentially doing the same thing as a or, okay? And then the not is where you're saying none of these words, okay? So I kind of find it easier for you to look at this and kind of say, oh, this is what I want, right? But doing it from like the search bar is kind of like like a shorthand, I guess, or like a fast way to do it. But like I said, I feel like it's more easy for you to do the searches like this. But I'm just telling you, these words match up to what I was just saying before between the and, the quotes. Remember, I was showing you the quotes before, and then or, and then none. Okay. And then some of the other stuff that we were talking about, you can kind of do other things to refine your search a bit here. Okay. So let me step back to here. So this is your advanced Google search, what I was just at before. Okay. So, I think the other things, the page ranking stuff, there's always been like, evolution of the page rank. It's not like from day one they came up with this page ranking algorithm, but it's constantly evolving, kind of quote unquote getting better or whatever, right? And so some of the things that has come more recently is from the time that internet quote unquote was more common consumer usage, right? So let's say the late 90s or so. It's not to say the internet was invented in the late 90s, but from a consumer standpoint, probably around the late 90s is when, internet was really more widely used or starting to get more widely used by consumers. But, the page ranking that you might look at or how things were ranked back then compared to now has changed over time, right? And things like Google came along, right? Google was not the initial search engine, right? There was other types of search engines with different types of algorithms and whatnot. But, just to tell you, just to show how this is something that is constantly being refined and whatnot, is this idea of the mobile friendly design to get you a better page rank, right? So these days, probably like, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but from a consumer standpoint, like it's got to be more than 2/3, if not more, of the page usage is going to be on their mobile phone. So actually being mobile friendly web page is pretty important, right? There's going to be a lot of people doing searches on the mobile. So they've kind of incorporated that and said, you're going to get a better page rank based on that, right? So if you happen to have a web page that's not mobile friendly, you're not going to get ranked high, and you're probably not going to do well. So if you want your page to do well, you probably want to make it mobile friendly. Okay. But the page ranking algorithm is constantly being modified, enhanced, and whatnot. And this is just one example of that happening. So this is like one of the earlier, these are kind of what I consider like the base ways to do the page ranking and how things kind of started, right? So as it says, it's pioneered by Google, okay? And so one thing that they would do, beyond like analyzing the content with the crawlers, is to say, if you have a page pointing to you, I guess other people like your page or think your page has something useful, right? So a page link to that references your page, gives you points essentially, right? Or increases your page rank, right? And maybe the more pages that are pointing to you, maybe your page is even more important, right? So if you have your own web page that no one is pointing to you or referencing you, probably your page is not really that valuable, right? But if you have like maybe 100 pages pointing to you, maybe you have something that's worthwhile. Maybe your page is kind of important, right? So, you increase the rank of your page by having more and more pages pointing to you, okay? Now, let's say you have an authoritative page, let's say Apple, right? Apple page is probably a pretty highly ranked page, right? If Apple's page is pointing to your page, then that's almost like a huge bonus, right? That kind of gets you like even more authoritative in terms of your page ranking, right? So when people talk about how do you increase your page rank, there's a couple of different ways, right? Just like I alluded to with the mobile friendly design. but you have like, a reference to your page, good. That's like, increases your rank. If multiple pages pointing to you, that's even better, right? And if you have like authoritative pages pointing to you, that's even better, right? That's like number one, right? If you can get like all these big companies, big pages pointing to you, your page must be pretty good, right? So that's how you increase the ranking here. So that's kind of like the layer on top of the index. So the web crawlers, they came up with the index. They say your page has stuff about apples or has stuff about tigers or whatever it has in there. You have pictures, it knows whether you have pictures in there and whatnot. And then, is your page important? Is your page like, should it be like considered a highly ranked page, will be determined by things like these things here. There's actually a little bit more to the page ranking than this, but these are kind of like the basic, like core type of things that help to increase the rank of your page. Okay. And then here is going to be like just a reminder of the different terms you should make sure you're familiar with. And for the exam, well, not here. For the exam, be mindful of things like what I just showed here. You're going to have some Venn diagrams. You want to be able to show how these searches translate into Venn diagrams. Okay. And so what I want to do for like in-class work, just to have you guys play around with this a little bit, I think it's the easiest thing to do to kind of test out your searches is to do it on images, right? But you can do it on regular pages if you want to. So I think what I'd like to have all of you do is just to do some searches and try to do things like I just did with tiger and baseball, right? So try to do, or actually, let me go back to the apples. And let me do the boat thing here, okay? So if I did this, this shows me the and, right? I can do it like that, or let me just make it more explicit and I'll do apples and boat. And then apples or boat, right? It's kind of doesn't matter. You probably very few times you see an apple and a boat together, right? But you could do an apple minus boat. Okay, so do that with any particular topics you want within reason. Just show me the and, the or, and the minus sign, and show some pictures, and then you can do a screenshot of it. You can take a picture of it, send me an email, and I'll use that as our break before I step into HTML after our break. So right now I see it's 6:39, so I'm going to start back up at 6:49. Okay. All right. So I'll see you guys in 10 minutes. Take some time, send me some photos of those 3 different types of Google searches.
So Professor, we're doing an and, a minus, and an or with 2 different subjects?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So go ahead and do that. Hopefully that should be a quick thing for you to do. And, we'll reconvene in 10 minutes, 6:49.
Professor?
Yes?
Are we keeping the same two subjects throughout, or are we changing it up?
No, it's up to you, right?
Okay.
I just want you to demonstrate like how the and, the or, and the minus works. It could be any two subjects, doesn't matter. Okay, so want to kind of get back to things here. I just double checked, and the video on how web search engine works is actually on here, which I kind of thought I put in there, but I just had to double check that. Like I said, I'm gonna take the exam one sample questions, and I'll also be posting it up to here. So in case you don't remember, it's right up here. You come to your home page, and right down here under course information, allow section 6 to 8, and all the information that you should need is up here, whether it's like this stuff up here or each week by week material. Okay, so I'm going to put the sample one exam up here at the top, so you guys can look at it and let me know if there's any questions. Okay, of course, obviously some of the sample questions are going to cover material that we haven't covered yet, but by the end of the lecture for today, hopefully it covered most of what you're going to be looking to study. Okay. All right. So what is this chapter? We're covering chapter 4. Chapter 4 is basically you're stepping into HTML. Okay. So your basic HTML. So I realized that I kind of go through a lot of this content. It'd be good to give you some context on these things. You kind of say, well, okay, this is supposed to be like applications of technology for business. So what happens here, right? Now I know, like, you know, probably in more recent times, you have like a lot of like editors and stuff that kind of does like a lot of the work for you. So let's say, you know, you wanted to go through exercise, you just set up a new business, or you just want to do some sort of campaign, and there's many channels that you're looking at, right? You're looking through various social media channels, but you may also be looking to set up a website. It could be like you have a business and you're trying to present yourself out to the world, to your customers, to your clients, right? Maybe you're doing an e-commerce site. Maybe you're kind of doing stuff where you sell stuff on your site and you're taking payments, handling all that type of stuff. Maybe not. Maybe you're doing this through Amazon or something. Or are you doing this internally? You have an internal company website where you're trying to get information out to your employees on their health benefits, or, you know, calculating like, you know, their retirement benefits, whatever, right? Like all that type of stuff. You know, it's basically done through some sort of channel over the internet, whether it's like, you know, going through your mobile phone, whether it's going through various social media outlets, or whether it's a dedicated site just to process certain things, right? It could be an e-commerce site. So all of this will come together in that regard. So you kind of try to understand, like, you know, if you do create a website, how do you make sure people find you, right? So you're going to probably have to pay some money to get your ads out there. You're going to target your ads, and you're going to be looking for certain types of demographics, you know, certain types of people, certain location and whatnot. Then you want them to come to your site if they're searching for you, right? Let's say someone says, hey, I want to buy product XYZ, and they want to type that in. Hopefully your site will come up, right? If you're selling something and they're looking for it, you really probably want to be at the top of the search there, right? So you have to design your page accordingly so that it will come up at the top of the list, right? Whether it's like you're paying Google to help you with that, or you design your own page, or a combination of that. Okay, so, you know, some of the stuff that we're talking about here, you know, that's sort of the context, right? And, you know, when we're doing stuff on the web pages, yeah, you know, you could just type in some plain text, but that's kind of not exciting, not that appealing. You're probably, when we talk about like what we talked about earlier about user experience, that's probably not going to get you a lot of people happy with the user experience, right? So then that's when it gets into a lot of different things in terms of like styling and, you know, how do you make a good user experience, a good look and feel, all that type of stuff, right? So that kind of maybe gives you some context about the application of these type of things for whatever you might be doing, right? I mean, I never kind of was thinking, oh yeah, how many times am I going to set up my own web page? But in fact, it's turned out I've actually had to work with web pages like quite a number of different times, whether it's internally at my company or whether it's externally for some of the businesses that I deal with on the outside, or some of the other social activities that I'm involved with. Somehow I get pulled into setting up websites and all that kind of stuff. You're going to have this type of medium that you want to connect to the rest of the world. And the technology around this is getting more and more slick over time, right? If you ever looked at web pages back from the 80s or 90s, they look very basic compared to now. It's almost like you looking at a black and white television compared to whatever you can look at right now. So, you have to keep up with the times, right? You have to kind of make sure that whatever content that you have, whatever information that you have, has to look up to snuff, right? And so kind of what we're showing you here is really the basic stuff, but hopefully you can build on it if you ever want to come up with a slick website, let's say, right? Or a slick e-commerce site or whatever, okay? So anyway, the typical stuff, right? Here's the chapter 4 stuff, and here's like all these different types of terms. Oops. Here's all the different type of terms that we'll go through, and I'll try to cover each of these during the lecture today. If I miss anything, make sure you let me know. And here we go. Okay, so what is HTML? Okay, well, that's pretty much what it is, right? Hypertext markup language, right? So you can think of like your web browser as like your blank sheet of paper, right? So you can write on your blank sheet of paper just some plain text. Well, how big do you want the text to be? What type of font do you want to use? These days, there's just like a huge number of fonts that you can use, right? For whatever reason, right? Some fonts are better to use for reading, in certain cases, certain colors, whatever, certain sizing. Are you doing this on a mobile phone? Whatever, right? There's all kinds of formatting that you want to do to make your text look better, right? Or you want to break things out in paragraphs. You want to embed some images. You want to create some links to other web pages, maybe. So all of that you have to put into here, and HTML helps you to essentially format it, right? And kind of hang everything together, right? At the same time, there's information within the HTML that also helps to drive, like, let's say the crawlers to understand what is in your page, right? Because not everybody's going to just jump out there and jump onto your page immediately, right? You have to be found. So how do you get found is kind of what I just covered for the last chapter. Like you have to put stuff in the HTML tags that help you to get found, okay? And then, how do we get all these slick looking websites? And how do you do it without having to type certain things over and over again? How do you get like all of the pages on your website to have like a good look and feel, a similar look and feel? Then you have this concept of CSS, right? And that stands for cascading style sheets, okay? And you get all kinds of stuff with that, right? And then you just use what's available to these style sheets, okay? And you might notice this, right? You use certain all kinds of editors, right? You might have just seen when I went to Canvas, when I was over here, when I did this to edit it, I'm basically looking at HTML, right? So if I go like this is one thing here. But if I want to play around with doing different things on here, let me see here. Where's the HTML? I'll flip this to HTML. Strange enough, I could swear I'm supposed to be able to flip this to HTML here. Here we go. So I flipped it to HTML. So, you know, all of this stuff here is raw HTML. Okay. If I flip this back, oops, where am I? Flip this back, then this is kind of like a what you see, what you see is what you get type of thing, right? So you can type it in, but sometimes you look at this, you're not quite sure, and they don't have enough buttons here to kind of give you fast, easy ways to do these things. You want to, you know, customize it a little bit. Then you go right into the HTML and do different things here. Okay, so it's under the covers. There's a lot of good editors, a lot of tools that basically allow you to work at this level. You don't necessarily have to do the HTML, but a lot of times you might want to go beyond the basic stuff that they offer here, and you can do more stuff by going at the raw HTML, right? So it's almost like when you're tuning your car, right? Maybe you're pretty happy with the way the car came from the factory, but maybe you want to tweak a few things on the computer chip to make your car, I don't know, go faster maybe. So you kind of go under the covers. And in this case, you go under the covers and you can do what you want there to customize it to your taste, right? So that's what we can do with HTML, right? But these days, there's like a lot of HTML tooling out there that makes it a lot easier. So a lot of times you probably don't need to work at this level, but it's good to understand how to do it in case you do need to customize this and tweak this. So, and I'm doing this with Canvas when I set up the class page, you know, for every week. Okay. Anyway, I'm digressing, I think. So, but basically that's like this point here, right? So it's not just for websites. You'll see this in a lot of different things where basically you're working with HTML. Okay. Oops. So HTML5 is basically the latest types of standard, which, you know, is friendly towards mobile, a lot of things with, you know, video and whatnot. And then this is a big thing, eliminate the use of Flash. That's kind of a long story, not really relevant for this class, but, you know, something maybe you might look at one day and search on that, right? I added this part here, and I'm going to show that to you in a second. Where am I? Over here. Okay. So this is a HTML5 editor. And what I like about this, so you can see like name of person, you know, as you type things. So name, you can see I type on the left, it kind of pops up right away on the right. Okay. So I kind of like that type of thing. You kind of get like this instant feedback. If you do something on the left side, you get something on the right side here. So Chicagoland, whatever, right? So, you know, you type stuff on the left, it goes to your right immediately, right? But I do have to show you kind of doing it the other way with working with the HTML file, because that's how you're gonna have to do your assignment. So I like this, just like I said, it's a quick online working type of thing, but it's kind of like a little bit of a pain to kind of do this, and you have to kind of copy and paste it into a file and then submit that. Later on, I'm going to kind of show you to work directly with the HTML file. I'm on a PC, so I'll probably use like Notepad++. I know some of your TAs, they like to do stuff with Visual Studio, or maybe they're doing stuff with Atom. You know, I don't know how many of you are running on MacBooks, but you know, you might be using Atom if you're using a MacBook. On a PC. I think Notepad++ should be fine. So we'll go through that. If you're kind of stuck, you have a special computer or whatever, just kind of let us know and we'll see what we can do to get you something that works. Okay. So, you know, you kind of have to use the editor, and then you have a web page next to it. You kind of refresh it and whatnot. Not a huge pain in the butt, but it's, you know, still extra thing. So I like having this HTML5 online, and this is not the only one. There's a couple of these things, and like I said, the nice thing is you can kind of see instantly whether your thing is working or not. Maybe you have a typo, maybe you screw something up. What can I screw up here? So maybe I'll take and see how when I moved around, you can see it matches up the tags like this, right? You can see it as strong and the strong here. So let's say for whatever reason, I screwed that up here like this. Then you can say, hey, what happened to my tag here, right? I don't got like this matching strong anymore. And look what happened over here. You can see because I screwed up the tag here, it thought it was a piece of text, right? And then I kind of put it into here like that, right? So I'm saying, oh, yeah, this kind of doesn't look right. I need to match this up. So I need to put this strong, oops, like that. And magic, right? I got this matching up to this, right? So you can see that. And you can see over here, it's good. No issues, right? Now it's not 100% perfect because sometimes people say, oh, I can change things here and then it will go reflected to here. But sometimes you get in some weird situations going back and forth, and that's not good. So it could be a little bit buggy depending on what you do. This is not like meant to be like a professional thing. It's just kind of messing around a little bit. But I think for this class, it should be good enough, right? It should work. But yeah, you could change stuff here, let's say, right? And then it will make changes on your left-hand side too. But there's some buggy things when you try to go back and forth, kind of stepping on each other. And it screws up this side, makes it less readable, okay? So that's what this is. So I left this here, but it's easy. Just search for HTML5 editor and you'll get this, okay? So yeah, there's like these different types of things with formatting. I'm going to step into each of these. So how do you describe a web page? Okay, so you can say like, I have a web page and it's looking at these tags or these pages on the fly, right? So as you feed it in, it automatically, quote unquote, renders the page, right? So you have to not only just send the information, but you have to send the information and how do you want to format it, right? As part of this. So that's why you have like this, this HTML essentially, right? So you're not actually storing like how it looks or anything like that on the, it's less dynamic. It's like a static type of thing. So it's a little bit more dynamic. You can change things and then it would just refresh whatnot, right? So you kind of see this more when you get into like, let's say multiple web pages and you want to kind of cascade things down, like you use the CSS style sheets and whatnot. It's more of like an interpreted or dynamic type of thing, okay? So one key concept with this is the idea of tags, right? And you kind of saw that when I was back on here. Tags are these things here, right? Wherever like I click on something, it kind of matches it up, right? So you have like this TD here, and then you have like this matching tag here. And the only difference is there's like a / before it. So you have TD and then a / TD. So there's your tags there, okay? And that's what this describes here, right? Words or abbreviations enclosed in these brackets, okay? And they usually come in pairs, right? There are some exceptions, right? But most of the time they come in pairs. So we talked about the title before, right? So you have the title like this and like this, right? And so part of what that does is that little tab at the top of your browser is going to say Web Basics when you do that at the top of your page, okay? And then you refer to like what's inside would be the content between the tags, the element, okay? And so you have this, right? These are kind of like the key parts here. So this is the car set. These days, like I don't think it really matters whether you have car set UTF-8 or not. But you put it in there, it's kind of like this extra safety type of thing, I guess. So you can put, this basically is the character set for your web page, okay? So this head information is not actually getting displayed here. And it's just kind of, like general types of formatting or general things that could be accessed for your page in one place at the top, right? As opposed to like sticking it somewhere in the body, okay? So it's kind of useful just in terms of organizing things to have these type of stuff at the top, at the head, and then be accessed throughout the rest of the body, which is down here, right? But there is no reason why you couldn't just put it in line all over the place within the body, but it's just not really good practice to do that if you're gonna, especially if you're gonna access it in multiple places. So for example, later on when we start doing like the CSS or the style sheets, you want to try to get it up as close to the top as possible, whether it's like importing the file or whatnot, so that you have access to it throughout the rest of your document. Okay. And I set up a folder here. So sample HTML, okay, and this is what I mean. You have to edit this with a Notepad++, okay. Might be a little bit small here, so let me zoom this. Okay. Okay, hopefully that's big enough so you can see that. Because if I don't, normally you might see a Word document or something, you would just double click it, right? So if you double click it, then it just pops up into your web page, right? So normally what you kind of have to do is you kind of have these side by side like this. So I make my change on this, and then I kind of have to refresh my web page over here. Okay, and then here, and I'm going to refresh this, and you get that, right? So a little bit of an extra step compared to what I was doing with the HTML5 editor, but not that big of a deal, right? The reason why I kind of show you this right now is because ultimately when you submit your assignment, this is what you have to do. You have to submit like this HTML page to me. So you have to upload it through Canvas as a file, HTML file, and then that's what we're going to be grading for your assignment. So this is what you have to do here, okay? So you create something and then you put .html, right? That's the extension, right? Right here. Oops, I double clicked on it again. There. This part right here, this HTML, that's your extension. There's a dot here, okay? And there's your HTML file, okay? So when you do stuff, if you have any issues, you're kind of wondering why certain things are not appearing the way you want it to appear, we can try and troubleshoot it. Just, send me an email. You can send me the HTML file or whatever, or send it to your TA actually. And then, they can troubleshoot it for you, right? And we can work with it. Sometimes, with these things, when you're working directly with the HTML, it's easy to have a typo or whatever. The nice thing about things like this, right? One of the common typos is to screw up your tags, right? You don't have a matching tag. So if I screwed this up like this for whatever reason, I forgot to close this, or maybe I forgot to put in a // and I do this, and then I come over to here. Okay. So it's really hard to troubleshoot and see what's going on here. So that's why you kind of have things like the HTML5 editor to kind of help along with this. The Notepad++ does some stuff. You can see it tries to figure things out, trying to match these tags here. You got this little red for the H3. So it's not bad. It's a little bit better than just a straight Notepad. But I'm going to fix this like that. Okay. Okay, so how did I make this show up? So what happens is it's all pointing to this file, this sample HTML. So right now this notepad is editing this, right? And then this screen right here is pointing to it, right? And I'm gonna talk a little bit about this in a second when we talk about absolute path and relative path. But basically to access this, well, it was easy for me because I just double clicked on this HTML file and it knows to pop up a browser, in this case, my Chrome browser, to display this. But if I was just typing this on the command line here, I'm using my my path on my local computer, right? So I'm basically saying like my C drive, users, Chris, desktop, HTML, sample.html to refer to this, okay? So that's really like your full path, your absolute path here to get to this web page here. So I would just hit refresh anytime I made a change here. Okay, and then I'll save this. Then I would refresh this, and you can see it popped up here. Okay. Yeah, so yes, you can use any type of editor. I'm just using Notepad++, right? Like I said, probably your TAs probably would like to use Visual Studio, right? So any editor will be fine, right? So in my case, I use Notepad++, I save it down, and then I just refresh my browser, okay? There's other tools that kind of maybe try to do all of that all together in one shot. So it's up to you if you want to do that or not, okay? But this is, to me, is the most basic setup, okay? Let me try to get back to the here and kind of start to go through each of the sections for the HTML. Actually, did I have a title on here? Oh, I do have a title. Okay, so let me see here. I have so many pages here. Let me pull this out. And so you can see page title here. Let me take this out. Let me make it more obvious. Page top. So you can see this page top. So that's what happens when you put a title up here. That sticks it up here. Okay, but like I said, that also helps for people looking at this to try to figure out what this page is about when they're analyzing your web page. Okay, so let me go back to here and oops, wrong one. Actually, I want the PowerPoint. Okay, here. So yeah, title. Right, so you can see this, right? So you see Rutgers University, the blah, blah, blah. And you can see down here, it's showing that, okay? And then it just writes some other information here. Doesn't really matter. There's not much on the header that you're gonna display in terms of text down here. That's what's gonna go into the body, okay? So as it says, the body section contains the content of the page. So whatever you're gonna type, like this part right here, the main content of the page goes here. Okay, so whatever you're typing, what you want people to see on the page is here, right? And you can see the person who did this like little screenshot, you can see they had the same thing I did, right? They have the file, C drive, user, Steve, they're using a Dropbox here and whatnot, right? I had the similar type of thing. I just wasn't using Dropbox, okay? But whatever you want in your content, that's what's going to go down here. That's in the body right here. And you can see the main content of the page goes here. The main content of the page goes here. Okay. All right. So what are the different types of tags? These are the basic tags here, right? And like if you look at the resources that I put up here, where's the oh yeah, here we go. W3 school resources. Okay. Yeah, let me cancel out of this. So W3 school resources. You can see there's a whole bunch of tags, right? You're not gonna want to go through all of these tags here, right? They're just for reference, for your own information. You want to look through these on your own time, that's fine. Please stick to the tags that we're teaching in this class, right? We kind of have a really good feel for these assignments and what tags should be used to complete these assignments. So if you go ahead and use something like one of these tags that wasn't taught in class to do something, it's going to get picked up pretty quickly when we do the scans for academic integrity issues. So I'm warning you, don't do anything with tags that are not taught in the class, because there's all kinds of ways to do things. Some of them are a little bit more advanced, and it's pretty much above the level of what the target audience for this class is. We're meant to try to keep things at a fairly basic or introductory level. And that's what we're going to be doing with the tags, with the JavaScripts, even to a certain extent, the Excel stuff too. So I'm showing this to you, but try to stick to like the basic tags that we're teaching here. Let's say I'm looking at the body. It gives you some information here about it, and you can like drill into. There's like a little thing here you can do, try it yourself, right? So the same type of thing, you type stuff on the left and you have something on the right, right? So CD, and then I hit run, and then you get that. Okay, so that type of thing, this is a pretty good resource. I'm just warning you to not do stuff with the other things that are not taught in class. Okay, I don't want you to get in trouble with the academic integrity violation scans. Okay, so anyway, so here's the kind of the different tags, the major tags or the basic tags that we kind of go through here. Okay. So it's kind of self-explanatory, right? So you have a div that cuts it up into sections. You have paragraphs, H1 through H6. It's essentially making it bigger. And let me actually just do it right now. So I'm here. Where's my editor at? So I'm here. So here's H1. You can see that at the top. Kind of contrasts a little bit. Let me, oh, okay. Here's what I'll do. I'll change this to be H5. Okay, so this kind of draws a contrast, right? You can see H1 is here, right? And then you can see H5 kind of does it like that, right? So it's kind of a combination of your sizing and being bold, where you kind of have these different types of heading levels, right? So if you want something kind of the biggest, you kind of using this H1, okay? So that's what this part is here, okay? You can also do bold, right? And italics and superscript, although I kind of say we're not really using superscript too much in class, but you can do that, right? So the superscript, underline, the bold is probably the most common thing, right? Italics, maybe the next most. And then you can kind of get into these here, okay? And so when they say order matters, it's not the fact that like it's a BIU here. Like I can put the B in here as long as the B is on the inner part here. What I cannot do is kind of put a B here and then put a B here where this U is, right? You kind of see how these matching sets have to be aligned. So the innermost tag here is this U, right? So you have to have the U here, right? If I have this I here, so this is the second one, right? Then I have to have the I here as the second one, and then the B here and the B here, right? So that's what they mean by saying order matters, okay? But these are basic concepts, right? When you think about like you're doing your Word document or whatever, right? You make something bold, you use a particular font, you make something bigger or whatever, right? These are basic types of like document formatting stuff that you might do, okay? So there's a couple of tags that don't necessarily come in pairs. So like I said, most of the time you have pairs like this, right? And if you don't put them in there, things can go unexpected, right? You're not quite sure what's happening. So can you have multiple H1s in different sections of the page? Yes, you can. So let me come back to here. So let me put H1 here and H1 here and save this. And where's this at? I'm going to refresh. So there you go, right? So yeah, this can be done any number of places. It doesn't matter, right? All this H does is kind of says, okay, make it big or emphasize it, right? That's all there is to it, right? So you can see it's kind of big and bold and stuff like that, right? And if you want to make it smaller, then you end up with something like that, like really small, okay? But you can do it multiple times, okay? So singleton. So there's a couple of places where you might have a singleton. One is to create a horizontal line, right? And one is to do a break. And what I was saying before, you remember the meta, right? This is it's short for metadata, right? Meta is short for metadata. And like I was saying, it helps to provide information to essentially the search engines to categorize your page and whatnot. So you might put tags in there that kind of say this page is about apples or oranges or whatever, right? And a horizontal line is a horizontal line and a break is a break, right? So I'm not being too creative here, I guess, but I don't know. So we do H1. Jumbo here, and let me do this first because it's all the same size now, and then show you what that looks like. All right, so it's like this, but let's say I do a BR. If you notice what I did here, you see it kind of has like this, what they kind of call it like code completion. So you're kind of typing it. And it kind of gives you some things. So that's kind of helpful, right? So here's BR, right? I'm going to do this and then I refresh. You see what happened? It created that space here, right? The reason why you do that, let me take this out for a second.
Professor, quick question.
Yep.
Would you recommend doing it on this, or would you recommend doing it on the HTML5 editor online?
I like to do it on the HTML5 editor just because I can see it right away. The only reason why I'm showing you this way is because you guys have to submit an HTML file into Canvas, right?
So could you just copy and paste your HTML5 though into this and it'll be perfect, or no?
Yes, but you notice, like, look at this, right? You see doc type HTML, you don't have that on here. So you can't do just a straight type. Where did I leave that? Oh, here we go. So you can see this, right? I mean, it's a very slight difference, right? If you know what you're doing, yeah, it's no problem, right? So you just have to remember, like, this is just a straight HTML, but when you look at your HTML file, you have things like the head, right? You have this doc type HTML. As long as you know that that's in here, like, you don't just take this and straight put it in here, then it's not going to work, right? For your HTML file to work, you need to have this stuff too, right? And you notice here, you don't see it, right? You only see like this H2, right? It's essentially straight into the HTML, like basically the guts of the HTML, right? So it's not 100% like the same, but if you know what you're doing, yeah. So what I would do is I would type all this stuff in here, and then I would paste it into the body, like here. You know what I'm saying? You know, so
Yeah, but do all like the HTML head and the meta and the title all in
Yeah.
in this. Okay.
yeah, exactly, right? So if you like to do that, that's good too. I mean, chances are I would probably do that too. You know, but you know, I'm trying to keep it so that you don't forget, because I've seen people, they just take it and just paste it right in here, and then they wonder why the HTML file doesn't work. So just be careful, right? So just like stick it in here and you're good to go. Okay. But if you want to just kind of keep it basic, you can also do what I'm doing here, which is edit in Notepad++, and then show it into your browser like that. Okay. Your personal preference. I don't have a strong preference either way. I'm just trying to save everyone here a headache in case they're trying to figure out how come they can't submit a working HTML file to Canvas. Okay. So you might say, well, okay, I did the BR to create this line break here. Well, what happens if I did this? I mean, okay, I know I you know, put these words in here, but what's that going to look like, right? So let me do that. So I'm going to save this like nothing, right? And that's because it doesn't recognize like these carriage returns that I put in here. So I look at the HTML, I might see this and it might be helpful for me because I don't like to see everything all in one line, but the browser, when it renders it, it looks like all one line, right? And there's a PowerPoint page on that to just highlight that point. But I'm just telling you right now, if you're thinking, oh, this is what I see on here. I see I got this, I have a space here, and then I have some more text over here. That's what I expect in my browser, but no, I don't, right? This is what I see. I see all one line. So, and that's just how browsers work. So it doesn't matter what I do here, actually. Let me just leave this, right? I changed it. Do you think it would be different? No, right? It looks the same, right? So one, I really want to get that space in there. This is what I would have to do. And maybe I'll copy this guy here and put this here like that. And refresh. And there you go. Right. So for you to get like these spaces, or I should know, not spaces, carriage returns, but it applies the same thing for spaces too. You know, you need to do stuff like this. You need to do this carriage return essentially. Okay. So hopefully I didn't belabor that point, but that's another thing to be careful with. Sometimes you look at things on your HTML page, your editor, I should say, and you see something, you expect that that's the way it's going to look like on your browser, and it's not, right? So you have to be careful with that. Anyway.
I had
Yes.
a question.
Yes.
So on the editor, you had indented some of the lines. What does that do?
For humans, it makes it more readable. For the computer, it doesn't do anything. So you can see here, right? Same thing, right? I indented these things or tabbed them. It's more for readability, right? That's another thing, right? I mean, you know, we're doing very small HTML pages here. We're not really making long HTML pages, but if you don't do like these type of indenting or whatever, and for some reason you screw something up, you like have a typo or whatever, sometimes these editors help you figure out like where you type something wrong or whatever. But even with that, if you don't like lay this out indenting or whatever, you're gonna like go cross-eyed trying to figure out what's wrong, right? It's like a real pain. So, you know, you can imagine if I just flattened everything out here, you know, and like I was saying, the tags work in the concept of tags works in terms of pairs. So you're always looking for pairs like this. saying, oh, okay, so everything that's within this pair or tags is gonna be going according to these H1, right? And when you start doing nesting and all kinds of crazy stuff like that, if you don't do indentation from a readability standpoint, if I'm trying to troubleshoot this, it's a real pain, right? Like I said, the editors try to help a little bit, but readability is very poor, right? So that's why we do like indentation, but it's purely for human consumption, right? The computer doesn't care, right? The computer, it'll just render based on like the tags that you're putting in, not the fact that, you indented or you did carriage returns or whatnot, okay? So here we are. Let me see. So we have the H1, which I talked about, that goes all the way down to H6. And so, like I was saying, the boldness gets less strong, right? So, or you can also have, the size, right? It's essentially getting bigger, right? When you get down to H1, right? So it's the boldness and the size that get affected when you start using these H1 to H6, right? And I guess you think of it things in terms of relative. You kind of say, well, this line is more important than the other line, so I want that to be bigger, right? So that's kind of how you think about it relative to each other, right? Like I can't look at H1 and say, oh, like what font size is that? Like I don't even know what that font size would be, right? It's more like saying, well, H1 is bigger than H2, right? So it's like a relative type of thing. Right, so this is the point I was making before, that you have inserted for readability, right? So you, or tab, right? You can tab it, indent it, whatever you want to call it. But HTML ignores the white space, and you can see that just from what I demonstrated over here, right? So you put in a whole bunch, like the whole sequence, the HTML is going to just turn into a single space, okay? And so for you to control that, you have to actually explicitly control that, just like I put the BR in here to make this space in here, this carriage return, okay? You kind of saw it a little bit, although I don't have a long line here, but if I kind of did this, you see what happened there? Like I kind of did that and then kind of resizes like that, right? And you can kind of see a little bit more when you look at it from a mobile phone perspective, when it renders it on the mobile too, okay? Yeah, so I just demonstrated that, right? So the narrower, wider browser window makes the lines break in different places, okay? This demonstrates the white space thing again, right? So you can see what happened here. They have the white space here, and then you can see what happened down here in the browser, right? It put it all together, okay? Yeah, I was just talking about this, right? You have the HTML editor and the browser. So what I used was the Notepad++, and I used this Chrome browser to render it, okay? Hold on a second. Again, I don't really know how many people are using Mac versus PC, but for me on a PC, I'm going to do stuff with a right mouse button, right? So I'll do something like that, right? For a Mac, you're going to use like a two fingertip thing to get the right mouse menu to open up so you can edit it. Because if you don't do that, you just, I'm going to double click it. What you're going to end up with is the web page, right? So you're not going to see the code behind it, which is what we're trying to work on, okay? Again, just a heads up for anyone that's using Mac. So yeah, this is exactly what I had here, right? So I had the editor and then I had this here. Okay. All right. So there's actually things that will actually look at your code to kind of almost double check it, right? No, so BR can't be within a tag. It's separate. A tag is a tag, right? You can't like stick other stuff in it. You can't they could be next to each other. Tags could be next to each other, but you can't put a tag within another tag. Yeah. So anyway, there's validation tool, right? So any of these will do validation, right? So you can take your tag, take your code and paste it in there. Let me just take one of these. I'll take this one right here, and let me go to here. Okay. And okay. Yeah, we can add a lang in here, but it doesn't matter. I don't think it's going to be a big deal. So I just got a warning here. Let me try to break something here. Oh, I can break it over here, I guess. Let me break this here and do a check. And then I have an error, right? So you can see here, it highlights this, right? The H1 that I just chopped off the front part here. Okay. And then I'll put this back and then I'll check it again and it takes it away, right? I wouldn't worry about this warning part here. Okay. So you can use this to validate your HTML. That double checks it to make sure that it's syntactically correct. Okay. So part of it is like you can look at it visually. A lot of times when you screw up the HTML, the page itself won't look right. But sometimes maybe it's not so apparent, and that's why it's good to use this validator. Okay. All right. So someone's asking me if I can explain the process we should take to submit the HTML assignment. So just give me a second on that. Yeah, so this is the validation tool. So I suggest, using it. Okay. These are more tags here. I think I covered most of these anyway. Yeah, I think I covered these. Here's some more tags here. So this gets into like lists, right? So it's pretty self-explanatory. Unordered list, ordered list. These are the list items in here. And we got some more code here. Basically all the different things that I had on my sample HTML. Here, some more example HTML, which I think I pretty much put this one into my sample HTML already. Additional information, that's fine. Okay, yeah, let me see here. Okay, so I think probably the important concepts I want to try to cover right now before we finish the lecture. Actually, before I go into file structure, let me answer the question about the process to submit the assignment. So really, the submit the assignment is just to do an upload for the file. When I go into my assignment here, okay, so when I go and do a submission, I can't actually go into it. This is actually not the student view. This is the instructor view. But basically, I'll click on this and then there'll be a button for you to hit to upload your file, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to create a HTML file. For the sake of argument, let me just create a dummy HTML file, right? So I'm here and I'm going to do new text document, and let me call this a dummy. Actually, I want to make this an HTML file. HTML. Okay, so it gives me a little warning because I'm changing the extension on this, but for this to be picked up, you need to call it a .html. So I want to change it to HTML. And then I'm going to edit this with my Notepad++. I'm going to paste that in there. I'm going to save it. I'm going to open this up and I get the same thing here. Okay, so bottom line, you need to create an HTML file and then you need to put all of this stuff in here and then you work on it, format it to the way we need it to format for your homework assignment, and then you're going to submit it up. Okay, so you know, you'll be working with this with your TAs in class, so you'll be able to create HTML files, do the HTML in them, and then submit them. Okay, and of course, for your assignment, we'll be doing something to that effect too. Okay, your first assignment is not going to cover the HTML. The first assignment is actually going to cover pseudocode, and I'll be covering that for next week. Okay. So anyway, for those of you that are on PCs, and I guess to a certain extent for Macs, you might recognize this. This is like a file system, and this is a structure, right? You think of it sort of like a tree. Okay, so if you want to say, oh, where's my, in this case, where's my photos at, right? So you have like this top level folder, and then you have your photos here. Index HTML, that's very common that people will use that as their starting web page, right? So a lot of times when you go to any random website, there'll be something that kind of says index.html. And then that essentially is your starting page that a lot of websites will start off with. And then within that, it'll access like the content, right? Let's say you have a lot of pictures on your website. So they'll probably have like a photos folder like this. And then you'll see some references from the index HTML into the photos folder to get whatever, right? And so they try to draw an analogy between this file structure to like a tree. Okay, so these folders and stuff like that. And so you can imagine for a lot of us, if you happen to have a C drive on your computer, right? You start off here, and then maybe you have a folder called cats, right? And then you have like this MA cat, and then my cat, and so on and so forth. This is the whole tree, right? So if I want to describe this full path, what they would call like the absolute path, you would start from the C, and you would show, you know, like a slash cat slash my cat slash LOL cat slash friend, right? It's like all the way down like that. That's your full path there, right? You know, a lot of times you don't want to have to type in this whole thing all the time, right? So let's say you're within your web page and you know your index.html is sitting over here. It's not sitting up here, right? So relative to index.html, you know, let's say you want to get to the fun HTML, right? This one right here. Then from here, you would say, this is your web page. Let's say I'm in this web page, I'm referencing fun HTML. Then I would say LOL cat, which is this folder right here, / the name of the file, fun.html, right? And that is called a relative path, right? It's relative to your, wherever your page is, right? If you happen to move this page up to here and stick it over here, then you have a problem, right? Because it's going to look for LOL cat, and it's not going to find it, right? So it's very specific to that location, right? If I put my index HTML here, any relative path reference I put in has to match to this, right? So in some ways, you know, you have to be careful in that regard, right? But by the same token, if I'm putting all kinds of absolute path, which would be the full path like this, let's say my hard drive crashed or something like that. I want to change my hard drive and I want to move it to somewhere else, and it has a couple more folders. Then all of a sudden my whole web page breaks because I'm counting on this file structure. And if I don't have that on my new drive, I'm in big trouble, right? So in some ways, when you're doing this in terms of a relative path, as long as you keep all of this stuff like in the same relative position, it's easier for you to move your web page around and stuff like that. Okay, there's cases where for each case it'll break things, but that's kind of like, kind of pros and cons between relative path and absolute path. Okay, so again, let me remind you, absolute path is like this full path like that, right? And relative path is like this, right? From the index HTML, I want to go to LOLCat and fun HTML. This is your relative path right here, okay? And this is an example going up, right? You see this dot, dot, and forward slash here. So if you're, let's say, over where you at here, so your AGIF HTML from the tabby HTML, which is down here, right? So tabby HTML, you're down here, and I want to get to AGIF HTML, which is up here. That means I have to go up 2 folders, right? I have to go up 1 and 2. So 1, 2, and then the gift HTML, right? So if I type in something here to look for a gift HTML, I use relative path by doing this, right? Dot, dot, forward slash, dot, dot, forward slash, a GIF HTML, and you're up to here, okay? So that's what we mean by relative path. And this is going, quote unquote, going up the tree. What I had here was going down the tree, right? So you specify the folder and the file name going that way. All right, if you went down a couple levels, you can see it went down a couple levels like that with the forward slashes. So this is going down, this is going up. Okay, so I hope that makes sense to you. And again, I'll repeat that, that's absolute versus relative path. Absolute path is the full path, and relative path is like starting from a point in the middle somewhere or here at the bottom, and then going to another folder to access whatever file. Okay, and it looks like this. Okay, so I hope that's clear to everyone. Okay, so this is like making links. So I'm going to talk about this, and then the following lecture, I'm going to talk about things like the lists and the tables, which I was referring to up here, right? These lists and stuff like that. I'm going to cover that, but I'm not going to cover it in today's lecture. I'll cover that for next week. But what I will pick up on today is like, it's very common. You're on a web page, you're trying to click to go to another page, right? A lot of times you click on a picture or you just click on that link itself, it'll go to another web page. And how do you do that? It's this thing called href, right? I shouldn't move this around, right? But you have href right here, okay? But when you're on a web page, you don't want to see this. You don't want to see like blah, 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 all of this, right? What do you want to see? You want to see something like this, right? You see the Russell and you see it's like in a blue italics. That tells you that this is a link that you can click on, right? I'm pretty sure most of you kind of seen that, right? So I don't want to see this. I don't want to see biocom, bios, blah, blah, like all over here. That looks bad, right? So that's why you put this in, right? You put Russell here at the end. If you look, you might not see it right away, but this is a tag, right? This is the A, right? And you see the bracket here. That's the first one. And then the Russell, which is what you would see on the screen here. And then you have the closing tag here, right? So this is the tag that you would use to show your link that you want to go to on your page, right? So as I was saying, it's a hyperlink, right? And this part here is the reference, and this part here is the text, this blue part right here, right? I think this is something that you see very often, right? And this part is just a normal text, right? It could be anything, right? Just whatever, blah, 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 right? That goes over here, that's fine. So this is the important part right here. The link that you want to go to and what you actually want to display on the screen here to click on, for people to click on, to go to that link, okay? Or go to that web page, I should say. And this just kind of repeats what I just said. You can try this on your own, right? So you can put in any link you want here, I guess. And then you put in here whatever you want them to click on, right? And then you close it off with the /A here tag. Okay, so hopefully that kind of gave you a flavor for HTML, introductory at least. The next parts for HTML, like I said, we're going to cover is going to go more into like the CSS. We're going to go into lists and we're going to go into tables here, right? And also we're going to get into pictures, right? So including pictures and whatnot. This one I should highlight because we did cover the validation service, okay? And I'll mention the escape symbol in the next lecture also, okay? So hopefully that covered a lot to give you the introduction for HTML. Play around with it, go into W3 schools, and just play around with things a little bit, okay? In the last few minutes, I don't know if anyone has any questions. If you don't have any questions here that you want to shoot out to me, you can just pop me an email and I'll answer as best I can, okay? Good. All right, great. All right, thank you. Have a good night, everyone. I'll talk to you soon.